Hello, I'm John Grom, and welcome to our 173rd Right and Left Discussion Forum. We hold our televised discussions twice monthly to demonstrate the value of civil, productive, open-minded political dialogue. Today's topic involves the renewable energy waste dilemma. President Biden has committed his administration to addressing climate change. This apparently means shifting from fossil fuels as our primary source of energy to renewable sources such as solar, wind, and battery-powered cars, even though the EPA has found that the technology for the end-of-life disposal of green energy system components is far from ready. Today's panel begins with Dr. Ronald Chamberlin, retired senior research chemist, then Patty Haskins, member of the Wadsworth City Council, and Bryan Laubaugh, president of R&B Financial Services. Ron, a recent paper from the Environmental Protection Agency casts doubt on our preparedness for large investments in renewable energy technologies. In fact, the EPA paper, which has now been dropped from their website, published in January of 2021, states a renewable energy system can only be as green and sustainable as the manner in which wastes are minimized, repurposed, and or disposed. My question to you is, do you think it's wise to begin dismantling our current energy systems before we are able to safely replace them with renewable sources?
John, in your usual very efficient fashion, you come up with this paper, and you excuse me, as you say, it's been withdrawn from the website to apparently did not satisfy their more stringent review techniques, so they put it on their archive. But you listed a number of things there, things like car batteries from using the lithium technology, and things like end of life for windmills and solar cells. And you're pointing out that there are some toxicity issues, perhaps, although from the chemist's point of view, that's not a reason to fear, but a reason to be respectful of their properties and take care of them in the proper way. We've not been, as a society, very, very successful at taking care of our waste streams. I understand that only about 9% of plastics are actually recycled, and they have to be separated. If you look at that little number on the bottom of your plastic container, that's the type of plastic, and they have to be separated out to be reused. And that's a difficult process and a costly process. There's a lot of hands-on labor. So that's a problem. Certainly, when I was first in 1963, when I came to Barberton for a job interview at PPG, they put us up in a little motel in Norton, which happened to be next to the then Barberton dump. And we could look out the back window of that and see the nice little campfires from the burning tires in the place. And how many of those tires that come off our cars do we actually have a use for when they're done being on our cars? Well, there's some things, they can chop them up and put them in asphalt and pave our roads with them, but that's a small thing. So that goes on. So let me give you a few statistics that I've been sort of looking at and why we should wait and what we should do about it. But there's a number of things going on here and related with climate change. One is sea level rise, and about 30% of the world's population lives within about 60 miles of a seashore, so that they're in some danger of sea level rise and property damage and what have you. There's been a recent study which pointed out, let's see if I can find my note here, that 1 in 5 deaths from air pollution are caused by, 1 in 5 deaths in the world are caused by air pollution from fossil fuels. Now, that's a recent study where through satellite data and other methods have been able to separate out the air pollution from fossil fuel products from other causes, other types of air pollution, such as dust storms or what have you. So that's a frightening thing. That's many millions of people. So economically, there was a report in about 2006 by the so-called the Stern report from England, and that did some estimates. National Research Defense Council recently did one in 2018, and looked at just 4 areas in our economy. One was damage done by hurricanes, damage done by water, effects on energy, and effects on the residential retail market, and estimated about 1.8% of our GDP would go to solving those problems. I don't know what our total GDP is at this point and how many millions of dollars, but that's on an ongoing basis year after year. So, should we wait? No, we should not wait. However, what we must do is at the same time be developing these methods of taking care of our waste streams, which we've not done in the past very efficiently, to point out the plastic streams and what have you. So that has to be part of the cost of it. It's in my view, in my estimate, in my reading of the data, the problems of climate change globally are going to be so severe that we can't not do this. I don't remember where I read this, and I don't have the data to back it up, but my brain picks up little snippets like this. And I recall a couple of years ago reading an analysis that concluded that the cost of not doing anything is going to be much greater than the cost of trying to do something. So my opinion is we can't wait. We need to continue this. We need at the same time be developing amelioration methods, carbon capture methods. For example, one of the things the EPA report sent out was end of life for windmills, for example. And many of those are composite materials that aren't easily recycled. If we had carbon capture in place, ways of collecting the CO2 and reusing or some way safely sequestering it, then incineration is a possibility for those sort of things, and use that to generate power. Plastics are another issue. Can we get rid of them? Well, can we use them? Can we change the ideas? Well, there are other kinds of plastics out there. There are biologically based plastics that are biodegradable. Most are not. Your plastic straw is going to last for several thousand years in your landfill, if it even makes it to the landfill. So there are all those issues that are very important out here in order to save ourselves from. You've probably seen the old movie, the Pixar movie WALL-E, where the little robot was, Earth. It was completely covered with trash, and the people have left and are out in space now. I can see that happening, perhaps, to some extent. So yes, we can't wait, but we need to at the same time be developing these methods to take care of it.
Thank you for your very usually well thought out comments, Don.
Thank you.
Patty, what are you thinking?
Well, I did a little research on this because I really had no background knowledge on it. And I read an article from Forbes magazine, which was published, I believe, 2 years ago. So this is not a new problem that we're just discovering now. At that time, they reported the International Renewable Energy Agency predicted that we would have 78 million tons of waste from solar panels by the year 2050, which is really quite dangerous. And the problem seems to be is that these panels contain lead, cadmium, antimony, and other toxic chemicals, which unfortunately, when used solar panels are simply sent to a landfill, it breaks into shards, which are then, the chemicals are then washed away, even just with rainwater, within a couple of months, and then seep into the ground, and then can also cause toxic problems. One of the other things that I found from reading a couple of other articles, I was reading something in National Geographic, and they were saying that unfortunately what some are doing is, as opposed to recycling the solar panels, which is what they really need to do as opposed to going to a landfill, these panels that are past their lifespan or are partially used are sent to countries in Africa or other places in Asia and so forth. And those countries are not as vigilant as far as recycling the panels when they break down. They simply go to a landfill. I know the only state here in the United States that really has addressed this is the state of Washington, which does require that solar panels at this time be recycled. And I was trying to look for information on what we can do about it. And I found one article that stated there are some things that could be done. That, first of all, the United Nations could set up a supervisory organization to supervise other countries when they receive these panels and what their distribution is of them and how they remove them at the end. Another way is for our government to do as in Washington and to demand that we store or recycle old solar panels as opposed to throwing them into a landfill. Another thing that can be done, and this is really the big problem, is extremely expensive to recycle solar panels, to the point where in many cases they feel that it's not worth economic wise the problems and the amount of money that it's going to cost to recycle them to actually use solar panels. But they suggested to put a fee on purchases of solar panels in the first place, which would then be used in order to accommodate recycling. The European Union presently has a model that producers have to finance the take back of these solar panels. And it is requiring these companies to do that. Now, again, the problem is going to be the money and the economics for those companies. Now, and Ron may be able to help me on this one because I've never heard of this. And they said one of the solutions might be to use perovskite. It's Perovskite. No idea what that is. Solar cells, as opposed to silicon cells within the solar panels. And these are cheaper to make. And if we can reduce the cost of the solar panels to produce for the companies, they then might be able to afford the increased cost to recycle or to replace the solar panels that are used. Now, as Ron said, though, this is not going to be something that's done quickly. I don't feel that it's reason to stop looking at alternative sources of energy. I mean, the city of Wadsworth itself has invested in solar power through AMP. We have solar power, wind power, all sorts of different types of things we are using in order to run electricity within the city of Wadsworth. But we need to see more of this in this country, I think, to promote the combat against climate change.
Patty, I have a quick question for you. In Medina County, I understand that people are able to get solar panels on their homes free. Now, are they responsible for disposing of those at the end of life?
Yes, I believe so. I think so. And I can't say with certainty on that. And solar panels, I think, last like 20 to 30 years.
Yes.
So they're relatively new, where we haven't seen people running into this problem that much yet. They're not, they haven't looked ahead. We're going to see that coming, though, in the next 20 years or so as these solar panels lose their life. And I also, when recycling was mentioned, and we talked about the small amount of plastics and so forth that are recycled. You're absolutely right. The city has been working for the last 5-6 years on dealing with recycling, and we have to deal with the county on this. And what we find is that unfortunately, many recycling efforts are very non-productive because people just simply do not recycle.
Yeah. Bryan, what are your thoughts?
Well, I wanted you to notice my background.
I love it. You're in Florida,
You know, I'm waiting for the seas to rise here,
huh?
and all the icebergs and the poles to melt. And New York City, by now, I think we all should have been under 6 foot of water if we believed Al Gore when he came out with his hit single, Inconvenient Truth. But I believe that we have to be responsible in how we use the planet's resources. I don't believe I'm a science denier. I just don't believe in the, I call it, you know, your hair's on fire, climate change people that are out there telling us we only have 10 years left for the planet. I don't believe that. I don't believe that in a minute. If they even believed their own hysteria, the Obamas would not have purchased a $12 million home on Martha's Vineyard because it'd be underwater in 10 years. Al Gore, same thing. All the political elites that have just been beating us over the head with climate change over the last 10 or 12 years all fly around in private jets. They give out 40 times the carbon than when I schlep around in a commercial airliner with 250 of my closest friends. You know, so there's this hypocrisy that's going on that I think we need to get rid of and say, you know, if we have a problem, let's address the problem. And one of the problems that you bring up is, what do we do with all the materials, you know, when the end of life comes for solar panels and these windmills? You know, how do you get rid of 3 80-foot long propellers from a wind turbine? It's very hard to repurpose that carbon fiber. How do we get rid of all the things that are supposed to be, you know, saving us? You know, the lithium batteries. I read a little report from the Climate Change Council or whatever. They said if we put 130 million electric cars on the road today, we would move the needle less than 0.4% when it comes to the climate. If we stopped flying, it would move the needle a half, you know, 0.5%.
Are you talking about the CO2 that we put into the environment?
I'm talking about the change in climate. You know, that we've changed the argument from global warming to climate change. You know, every time there's a little spike in temperature, it creates a hurricane somewhere. And I don't believe that as well. I don't believe that every time there's a hurricane or a storm or a forest fire, we can associate that with climate change. I'm a little more concerned with some of our trading partners. China brought on 184 coal-fired power plants last year. China, India, some of these developing countries are the biggest polluters. If you want to talk about, you know, these big plastic, I don't know what you call them, plastic blobs that are floating around in the ocean of bottles and nets and discarded plastic are coming from these countries. I would like to see China and India sign on to the Paris climate change accords that current president has now re-upped to. They are so far downstream when it comes to their own producing of CO2 and chemicals and pumping them into the atmosphere than we are. So I think the countries that are the most likely to pollute, and I don't know if China is using clean coal, I don't know what their coal is like, they got a lot of it and they're going to use it. I think they need to maybe step up and say, hey, we want to be responsible, you know, environmental citizens, world citizens. So we're going to maybe look at different ways to produce power for our country. So that's where I see, you know, this going. I don't believe China and India and some of these developing countries are even concerned about their waste stream. They're not concerned about where they're going to put these batteries. They're not concerned about, you know, pumping CO2 into the atmosphere with their coal-fired power plants. I would like to maybe explore nuclear power. You know, Japan has done a very nice job. If you'd read anything about Japan, they use very small nuclear power plants. They're very safe. and they provide a fair amount of their, their electricity that they use. And I believe I think the city of Wadsworth has a little bit of nuclear in there. I'd have to ask Patty, but I know they do water, they do solar, they do wind.
And yeah,
there's I don't believe there's anything wrong with nuclear. I mean, most of our military ships out there are nuclear powered. And they seem to be doing well. And I think we have tackled the issue with waste with nuclear. They turned those rods into missile head tips. They find that they go through aircraft pretty well. So there's a little brevity there, but I just think there's so much that we can do. But the problem is we have to do it with our hands tied behind our back, because the environmentalists out there only want one thing, and they're not willing to compromise. They're not willing to look at other solutions. They just have one thing in mind, and I think that's a non-starter.
And I don't know that we can paint all environmentalists though with that broad brush, that that's all they are interested in.
I didn't call them Democrats. I just said environmentalists.
And I didn't say Democrats either.
I know.
So,
It was implied.
Comment, please. On the air pollution health issue, there were four areas identified as this being a very serious problem. Areas of China, areas of India, areas in Europe, and areas in the northeastern United States. All of these have been a considerable risk from this problem. As in terms of the coal-fired power plants, absolutely, Brian. China is a very polluter here.
Yeah.
That's why my call for, and your comment about it wouldn't affect the climate change. No, because we not only have to go carbon neutral, we have to find ways of getting that carbon that's in the atmosphere out of the atmosphere. Trees do it nicely. The ocean does some of it, but we're acidifying the ocean because of the carbon dioxide.
What does that mean?
The other problems.
What does that mean, Ron?
Pardon me?
What does acidifying mean?
acidify.
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 Oh, okay.
Yeah, the carbon dioxide forms carbonic acid, which changes the pH of the water, which is not good for a lot of organisms that live there. So things which produce oxygen, for example, that we need.
Can we go back and
my comment about carbon, about being responsible, about ways of containing carbon and removing carbon, which I talked about earlier, are also important here. And I don't know how we get China and India to do this, but that's an international effort. It's possible. It's important. I agree with you. It's important.
Can we revisit nuclear for just a moment? The environmentalists destroyed the nuclear industry, in the 60s? Mainly because there was no reasonable way to dispose of spent nuclear rods. However, the federal government spent billions of dollars preparing the Yucca Mountain in Nevada as a safe depository for spent nuclear rods. But the Harry Reid put a stop to that. He did not want the nuclear rods anywhere in Nevada. However, recently, there was a very thorough study that's been underway for a long time that has finally declared that Yucca Mountain is a very, very safe, reasonable place to store nuclear rods. I realize it would be very difficult for any large investor to invest in nuclear energy these days, because not knowing what the politics are going to do to his investment in the future. But it seems to me that nuclear is on the rise all over the world, and that it is a safe, clean, efficient way to produce energy. And I think we ought to be thinking about doing that. Granted, private investors are going to stay away from it. It's poison. But the federal government could get involved in that.
I agree with you, John. There have been very significant technological advances in the design and design of nuclear power plants since the early ones. So they are much safer now. And I agree, it's a political issue. The uranium production and use of nuclear power plants is heavily subsidized anyway by the government. So there needs to be some progress there, and it's human nature. There's a great fear factor in that. Again, as a chemist, I hate to see that because it means respect. It doesn't mean fear.
I have Patty, maybe you can chime in on this. The city of Wadsworth, in building the, I call it the high school, but that whole complex up there, didn't they invest rather heavily in geothermal energy for that project?
Yeah. And that was part of, we actually got breaks as far as the cost, and for us, if we employed certain types of environmentally safe types of power and various things with all of the schools, not only the high school project, but when we did Valley View, I don't know if you remember, they had those open gardens of wildflowers and so forth that were put in the front of the schools. They're all but one gone now. They've actually removed them, but that was part of the move to be environmentally sound, and it did allow us to save a great deal, at least the school district, I should say, and thereby the taxpayers, to save a lot of money with that project.
Maybe if I could just say that, when you look at how cities and specifically our city is being responsible to provide power to the citizens, you can't shut off and say, we are not going to take any power from a coal-fired power plant. The poor folks down in Orville had a power plant that was grandfathered that they were using, and they were bringing it up to speed. And in a stroke of a pen, they came in and said, you can't do this. You can't do that to a city. You can't do that to the.
I just watched on the news this morning a report that the number of electric cars that are being produced out of Detroit and with the large car makers, and that they're investing heavily on this. And yes, I think that's a good move, and it's a big move as far as saving things. But I was just talking with my brother yesterday, and he said, we're never going to get away from the gas-powered automobile in our lifetime.
Well, thank you very much, folks. We've just run out of time, but it was a very productive session.